here with my wonderful cousin, Anne Bridwell Lorenz, and I would like to ask her to tell me more about our grandparents. Many of us don't remember them or ever have even met them.
Walter Benjamin Cook, he was in England with his family, and the family had become investigators of the church when he was a little boy. His oldest brother decided that he really wanted to join the church and was able to get the family, except for the father, to join the church. The mother loved the teachings, and so did several of the children. Well, the eldest brother wanted to make sure that that Walter would have an opportunity to come to the New World. That was a very long journey. Now he's 14 years old, thereabouts, and he was hired at Arbuck's as a hopper on the delivery truck. He also became aware that he could be hired at the Deseret News for another job, and while he was there, he became interested in the linotype machine. But he did a really good job, and he became very good at it. Lillian Pearl, and she was the second oldest in a family that came from Joseph Hiram Luck and Elizabeth Malvina Moore Holmberg. There were 8 children that lived through birth. 2 had passed away, and they lived in Mill Creek area, and they had a very large property, had many things that they grew. They also had animals that they cared for, as well as fish ponds. They had 5 fish ponds. As the children would grow up and get more responsibility on the farm, they had a lot of work to do. And that, along with the fact that they were pioneers from pioneer stock, coming from England, that gave them a lot of experience and fortitude. So he had spied this young, lovely lady, and her name was Lillian Pearl Luck. When he wanted to see Pearl, he would walk from wherever his residence was at the time out to the farm, and that was at 33rd South 15th or Highland Drive. He would visit, and if it got to be dark, then he would lay down outside on the ground and rest the night, and at daylight he would get up and go back, and he'd walk back. And so he just said to her one day, "What about us getting married?" And she said, "I think you're going to have to talk to my father." Grandmother was very conscious of trying to keep her family healthy, and so she had this recipe, which I don't have. I don't know what it is, but Mother told me that she would grind every day with a meat grinder carrots and beets and onions and tomatoes and probably whatever they had available to make juice for the family to have every day, to have the nutrition. They didn't have vitamin pills back then.
He worked for the Deseret News. He worked for Western Telegraph, I think it was, and I remember him staying at our home on Connor Street, and I remember that he would walk clear down to work and back every day when he went, and he loved to walk everywhere. He just was a hard worker. He wanted to have good health, and he loved his job as a linotyper, and it was a very important job, so that these newspapers and telegraphs and books could be printed.
As I remember being in the home with Grandma and Grandpa Cook at breakfast time, and that the tenants, the students that rented rooms downstairs were up for breakfast, and they were chatting and teasing Grandma Cook about Grandpa Cook and getting home late.
I'll tell you the story of Grandma and Grandpa Cook through a story of when he sprained my arm. He was sitting, it was summertime as I recall, and he was sitting in a green chair that had little nubbins of silk or fabric. It was kind of an interesting fabric, and he was sitting there reading the newspaper, and I went behind him. He had long hair, and I grabbed onto his hair and pulled it, and he shooed me, if I recall correctly, he re-shooed me away a couple of times, and I kept harassing him from behind, and he reached over the chair and grabbed my arm and pulled me up over, and pulled my arm out of the socket in the process. And then when he realized I was hurt, he got Pearl, Grandma Cook, and she came in, and she had the ability to scold him efficiently. And they put me in the car, called the doctor, I guess, and then put me in the car and took me downtown to the doctor's office. And I remember sitting in the back seat waiting to go in with Grandma Cook for an x-ray. But she was attentive and loving and stern, and I remember the kisses that she would give me were the rapid fire kisses on my cheek.
I remember Grandma Cook as being a very loving person, but also very, very desirous that things be done right. Okay, and she was a very fine young woman that I had a lot of fun with. There was no question in my mind that they loved me. Okay, I never even considered it any other way, but they were always very happy to see us when we arrived in Salt Lake, and when we were on the phone, they would be very happy that we were calling and talking to them. So I would say yes, I knew that they loved us.
Pearl was very, very orderly, very clean. I can remember asking her why she was vacuuming the floor, because there wasn't anything dirty on it, and there were just she and Ben living there. And she said that she vacuumed it every day. The kitchen was in white and tiled, which was very upper class for that period of time. The silver, the flatware, had colored stems on handles on them, and they were all in order, and the plates were colored, and I was just so impressed with the completeness of everything, coming from a family of 6 kids, and we didn't have anything that nice. She was slender. Ben, I remember him having eggs at the table and putting a lot of pepper on them, and Pearl said he was going to die from poisoning from all the pepper that he ate. There were special dinners that they held, and I attended 2 or 3 of them. She made at each one of them, she had a shredded carrot casserole, that was characteristic of hers. Ben had to do the dishes afterward, and she put the food away and the dishes away. I remember Ben putting Pearl on his shoulder. They would be fighting in the kitchen, and he put her on his shoulder, and she was kicking and telling him, Ben, put me down, Ben, put me down, and he walked her into the bedroom. So she was petite, and he was strong enough to carry her without any trouble at all, and I think he liked to tease her. I think he really quite adored her.
I was sleeping in front of the chair where I got hurt, and the kitchen light went on, like 2 in the morning, and Ben was tiptoeing in. He was in the kitchen cutting water. He loved watermelon, so he was cutting watermelon, and I got up and he cut me a piece of watermelon, and we sat and ate watermelon.
I remember going to her house one week, and she was very, very businesslike, very efficient, she worked very hard. She was all business. But yet she had a warm side too. When she greeted us, I remember her kissing me on the cheek, and it was these fast little rapid kisses. Every week they'd fill up these jugs of water at the artesian well, I guess it is. And I remember, I've never tasted water like that in my life. That was so great. I'll never forget that. But that's all they would drink. When she made dinner, she always made this carrot, something with shredded carrots and a ton of pepper. She always cooked a full meal and no snacks. When we went to bed at night, we had to brush our teeth with soda and gargled with salt and soda, and it was horrible. Punishment. I remember going to bed and just feeling like I died and gone to heaven, because she had these sheets that she had. I climbed up on this big bed, and the sheets had been pressed, and they were. They have this smell about them that takes on a certain smell when they're dried in the sun. She took me out to the farm to see the Luck farm, and we were there to work, and it was very hot and miserable. But she didn't keep us there too long. But it was interesting to see the farm and how much work it was. I thought, oh man, I'm glad my parents don't have one. It was tough. Ben had a voice that, I think in a sentence he could change octaves. I mean, his voice, just in speaking, he would just go way up and way down, and that with his English accent.
They had renters, and the renters had rooms downstairs, and she'd collect the rent. And I think at 222, which is the house that they had lived in before they moved to university, there they had renters too, I believe. Anyway, it was Pearl collected the rent, and I remember seeing her roll the rent money up in a ball and stuff it in her, in her bra. She managed the money. Ben was given an allowance, and he took a lunch bag to work, and I'm sure he didn't ever drive the car to work.
They didn't play with us, but I felt well cared for, and I did feel that they loved us. I think Grandma thought we were cute. She liked us. But we knew we had to be well behaved. We had to be good. She didn't. I just was amazed at how hard she worked. She was working all the time.
They took care of me. When I was with Grandma Cook, she was always wanted to make sure that I was okay, that I was sleeping, eating. She'd hug me, kiss me, took me to the farm, made me work. I had to pick tomatoes till I thought I was going to die. And Ben was never dismissive of a child. It was never, I didn't feel like a second-class citizen or a junior. They were good grandparents.
But then when he passed away, I thought the trip was off. But as the months wore on, it became the desire of Grandpa Cook to go to Europe. And while he invited my mother to go with him, she passed on the opportunity to me to go with him to Europe. And it's interesting that while he was there, in Arlington, Virginia, we'd gone into Washington, and we were walking down the street, and he came across, I believe it was the Washington Post Linotype operating room, and it said employees only. And Grandpa said, "Come on, let's go in. I want to see what they're doing." And I said, "Grandpa, it says employees only." He says, "Oh, don't worry about it." He says, "Just act like you know what you're doing, and we'll walk around." So we went in, and that was sort of the nature of what Grandpa was like. He would like to go and see things, even though there were some barriers there. We boarded the SS United States, then we went to Southampton, got off the boat in Southampton, and immediately Grandpa wanted to go see his brother, Charlie. And I believe Charlie lived in an area called Victoria. So we checked our bags at the train station, took the train down to Victoria, and Charlie. He had no idea that Grandpa was me. And it was a very nice reunion between the two of them. As the evening wore on, the decision had to be made where we were going to stay, and Grandpa decided that we needed to go into town and find a hotel. So we tried that, but all of the hotels at the time were closed. I don't know the reason why. I don't know if it was a Sunday or if it was just too late for the places to take on new guests. So that night we ended up sleeping on a park bench, and it was very cool and foggy that night, and a English policeman came by and asked what we were doing, and we explained, and he said, "Well, you just take care, I'll be around some more." So he sort of looked after us.
We took him on a vacation with the family to California. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be terrible because it's hot going down. And this is, I think, even before we had air conditioning in a car. But he was a joy to be with on that trip. He sat in the right rear seat all the time. He was just didn't want to be in the way, and he didn't want to be a problem. But my dad wanted him there, and I think he wanted to be there. And we'd go to the beach, and he'd be wearing his outfit, his white shirt, pants, suspenders, and good shoes. And he would play in the sand with us. I'm sure it ruined his shoes. I just remember him being a really good sport and a joker.
I remember going to Fendel's ice cream parlor with Ben and with my dad and one or two of my brothers. And it was a wonderful occasion because I loved ice cream, and so did everybody else, but especially Ben. He would eat the ice cream malts faster than I could ever imagine to eat one. I would get brain freezes and he would be done with his ice cream. Then he would, with his tongue, he would flick out his dentures and take them out and give me this big toothless grin, and I would just start giggling and laughing, and I'd ask him to do it again and again and again. He would only do it for about 3 or 4 times, and then he would stop. But that was a wonderful memory for me.
Another thing that I remember about Grandpa Cook was being at my grandmother and grandfather Anderson's cabin at Hebgen Lake. One day at Hebgen, at the cabin, he went for a long walk and he got lost, and I was so worried about him. I thought the bears were going to get him. But we found him, and he was just out walking and thinking and wanted to be alone, and I sure think about Grandma and his family, and I know he missed them so much.
And another vivid memory I have of Ben was when he flew to Salt Lake from England. He'd been in England. I think at the time he was courting Edna. And he flew into the Salt Lake airport and walked from the airport with his luggage to our house on 11th Avenue. And rang the doorbell around 6 in the morning. And I was just absolutely astounded that he had the strength to walk that distance. But he did. He was a really strong man.
Another thing that I remember about him is I was looking down onto 11th Avenue from the windows in our home, and I saw this taxi pull up, and out came Ben and Edna at that time, and they had their luggage, and I yelled at my parents and said, "Somebody's here," and Mom and Dad came. They said, "I can't believe it. We weren't expecting him. He's been over in England. We had no idea that he was coming."
He loved Edna, his second wife. I remember he went back to England and we missed him a lot. And I remember hearing that he married Edna and he later brought her back for us to meet her. I listened to my mom talk about her, and she had a fondness for Edna and was so grateful to Edna for all the work that she did with Grandpa to find the genealogy of our family, our forefathers. And she was an important part of Grandpa's life, and she was an important part of our life, and I'm grateful for her. I love my grandma and grandpas, and grateful for the heritage that they gave us.
The thing that I would say is that because of the courage that Ben had to leave his home in England and come to the United States at such a young age, he provided all of his children and grandchildren opportunities that we wouldn't have had he not taken that courage, had that opportunity. And so we owe him a debt of gratitude for all hard work, all the risks took and how he converted it to being able to raise up fine sons and daughter that allowed for generation 2, generation 3, generation 4 to have opportunities that they may never have had he not taken that risk. And to that end, I'm